David Stokes. David Stokes is a St. Louis native, is a graduate of St. Louis University High School and Fairfield, Connecticut University. He spent 5 years as assistant to St. Louis County Councilman Kurt S. Odenwald, where he was closely involved with legislation including Metrolink expansion, property assessment, HVAC licensing codes, the new Cardinal Ballpark, pharmacy privatization, and much more. He serves on the University City Library Board and is a board member of the St. Louis County Pachyderm Club. He lives in University City with his wife Jennifer and 3 children. He is suffering from a little bit of loss of voice, so if you guys will bear with him, he will be our first speaker.
All right, I think this will come out okay. Just want to get a moment here. Thank you very much. I apologize for this. Apparently I made a mistake last night all night at the hospitality suite of the Association of Missouri Republican Yodelers. I don't think that quite worked. So I mean, I'm not going to take 5 minutes. I don't think I could take 5 minutes if I could. I think this would go out on me rather quickly. So I'm just going to talk up here about the way we do economic development in Missouri. I'm just really going to speak for about 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to give one anecdote, one fact, and then I have 1 point. So one anecdote, one fact, and 1 point. It's going to be like a George Thorogood song, so sort of if you're a fan of George Thorogood. For a long time, I've always deeply wary of both the welfare state we're constructing for individuals and the welfare state that we're constructing for corporate businesses here, corporate welfare state in Missouri. But for a long time, I've sort of been more concerned, always been much more concerned about the individual welfare state. I thought it would be, the corporate welfare state, and that would be easy to get rid of. And it had less of a soul-deadening effect on the economy than the individual welfare state has on people's lives. So I have an anecdote or a story I read in the paper just a couple weeks ago. It says maybe I was wrong about that soul-deadening effect on our economy and on capitalism. The St. Louis Business Journal had a report just about 3 weeks ago. It was a story about a young man who was trying to create an entrepreneurial hotbed here in St. Louis. It's an entrepreneurial theme park, he calls it, where it's going to put everything that entrepreneurs need to get out and develop their small businesses and grow. And it's a fabulous idea. I'm reading this story and I'm loving it. I think how exciting this is. And then it gets to the line that the developer of this new Missouri entrepreneurial theme park has run all the numbers, and he's determined that the only way he can make his new entrepreneurial theme park work is through a combination of federal, state, and local tax credits and other taxes. That's the only way he'll be able to work, is make this new entrepreneurial park work. That is not where our economy is supposed to be going. That's not the direction where young capitalists, young entrepreneurs are first and foremost looking to the government to fund their ideas. But for this young person, that's certainly where it is going. And we need to reform that at the state and local level here in Missouri. But my one fact, which I think will surprise people, is that the point of tax credits is to stimulate economic development, to make it easier for businesses to conduct business in Missouri. But in the most recent fiscal year, I don't think people realize that we gave more away in tax credits than we collected in the state corporate income tax. We gave away $407 million, we issued $407 million in tax credits, and net corporate tax collections were only $275 million. It is possible for the state to eliminate the corporate income tax and not have any major effect on the Missouri State Treasury simply by phasing out the tax credit programs that are all used to offset corporate income tax in the first place. With that, I really feel that I've got about 2 more lines left in this throat. So I just want to stress that it is so important that at the state tax credit level and local tax subsidies like TDPs and TIPs, that we need dramatic reform of both in the state of Missouri. Not necessarily elimination. I'm not going to say that every time they're wrong in each case. Sometimes good things come from that, but we need to reform the limit that gives. Thank you very much.
See, they understood that precedent. They understood the morality behind having an honest monetary system. Now, that has far-reaching impacts when it comes to determining what we can do to protect our state from problems that may arise or may not arise because of the current problems with the monetary system. You know, there are folks that think that these guys in the Federal Reserve can control it and rein in what they've done, and everything's going to be happy someday. History does not bear that out. And I would just invite you to look at the historical record of this now. Learn the facts about where these things tend to go. And guess what? We've got an opportunity not only to provide economic development because of passage of this little simple 1 or 2 page bill, but we also have the opportunity to provide protection and insurance for the citizens of Missouri. I think morally we are duty bound to provide that insurance. So I appreciate your looking into this matter and educating yourselves even more on it. It is an important topic that is before us this year. We have an opportunity to lead in the nation, be a leader in the nation. And it can start in many ways with passage of this bill. Thank you very much.
The last of our 3 initial speakers is somebody I think you'll recognize, our former Lieutenant Governor Bill Phelps. He's a native of Becket, Missouri, and a graduate of the University of Missouri at age 26. He was elected to the Missouri House of Representatives for Southwest Kansas City and served 12 consecutive years, becoming the minority whip. In 1972, he became the first Republican lieutenant governor in 40 years. He became known as full-time Phelps by voluntarily becoming Missouri's first full-time lieutenant governor. He served with Governor Becket Fund, Attorney General Tjaden, and State Auditor John Ashcroft. These young Republicans reformed state government and revitalized the Republican Party. He was re-elected in 1976 with John Ashcroft as Attorney General when Jack Danforth was elected to the United States as a United States Senator. He is a former president of the Missouri Association of Republicans in 1963, chairman of the National Conference of Lieutenant Governors, president of the National Federation of Pachyderms in 1991 through 99, and since 2003 he has been a volunteer Missouri State Director of the Americans for Fair Taxation. Your former Lieutenant Governor, Bill Phelps.
Very much. How would you like to have a full paycheck without any deductions for income tax or payroll taxes and never again file an income tax return? That's what the Fair Tax does. It's H.R. 25 pending in the U.S. House. It has 59 co-sponsors, including 2 of our congressmen from Missouri, Sam Graves of the 6th District and Billy Long of the 7th District. Now, what is the fair tax? It replaces all tax on income. The IRS goes away. See, the IRS it's 100 years old this year, and it's getting bad with old age, and it's time to retire it. Because what started out 100 years ago with a tax on the rich of only 1 or 2%. Is today 73,000 pages of income tax. How many of you here understand what's in the income tax, 73,000 pages? I think the answer is no. So the simple thing to do is to eliminate the Internal Revenue Code, eliminate the IRS, and the IRS doesn't, and the IRS goes away. Why, even Obama, who's hiring IRS agents today to enforce Obamacare, will have trouble hiring IRS agents if the IRS goes away. So maybe Obamacare will go away. Which points out how the Internal Revenue Code is being used to control our behavior. So the fair tax is a national retail sales tax, only on the purchase of new goods and services for consumption. No business-to-business taxes, no tax on used property, no tax on money that you save, and you control the amount of tax you pay by what you buy. Now, isn't that a simple procedure? And it's only 144 pages compared to 73,000 pages. Now, this is a bill pending in Congress. This is supported by grassroots support because we know that the federal drug dealers, the underground cash economy, and all of that money is lost to the federal government. So that has to be made up by somebody. It's made up by you. Made up by all of you. And that averages about $2,500 per family a year to make up for the tax cheats, the non-filers, the cash economy, the prostitutes, the drug dealers, all of the illegal activities. They escape taxation. Now, under the fair tax, when they buy their fancy new car, they'll pay sales tax. When they buy anything new, like jewelry, on any of those personal items, they will pay a sales tax. So the IRS now costing Americans $450 billion a year to comply with it, and it's costing people in lost revenue as well. So fair tax applies only to new goods and services. The hidden taxes are eliminated. Those are the income taxes, payroll taxes, compliance costs that are built into the price of everything you buy. So the price of the products that you're paying today includes those hidden taxes. When you eliminate the IRS, you eliminate those hidden taxes. Price competition forces that price down to its true cost. And the fair tax is applied. Fair tax at the cash register is 23%. But you would have to buy 983,000 new goods and services to pay an effective tax rate of 23% because of the prebate. Prebate is everybody is entitled to get reimbursed in advance of the tax paid on the necessities of life based on family size as judged by the federal government each year as the poverty level. So for a family of four, which is a typical American family, earning $50,000 a year, which is the median MEDIAN income in America today, the effective tax rate would not be 23%, it would be 9%. Now you compare that to the income tax. They would pay 10% rate on the income tax, maybe 15% rate. They would also pay 7.6% payroll tax rate. So let's help the American family. We are losing jobs in America because of the tax code. Why? Because foreign-made products come into America at a discount. They have consumption taxes that are removed at their borders. Our company products, our American-made products, carry these hidden taxes, income, payroll, compliance costs, which increases the cost of American-made goods. It makes them less competitive in the international market. That's why I'm sure many of you can understand that one time in your hometown, you remember a manufacturing establishment that used to be there. You remember a business that used to be there. It's no longer there anymore. It's gone abroad. So to be competitive, those companies have to go abroad. But if you pass the fair tax, it will be a level playing field. So America's hurting today. We have high income, high employment. The last quarter, there was a negative growth in the economy of 1.1%. And we need a growth strategy and a growth tax system. That's the fair tax. The IRS results of 2009 and 2010 were analyzed by the Becket Institute. And the Becket Institute found that had the fair tax been in effect in 2009, there would have been a growth in revenue of about $170 billion. In 2010, would be a growth in revenue of about $200-some-odd billion. That is without a tax increase. Everybody pays the same rate under the fair tax. You pay tax based on what you spend. The more that you spend, the more tax you pay. There are no tax shelters. There's no way of escaping it. Let's be fair to all Americans and pass the fair tax. Fairtax.org. Thank you.
Before we get started with asking the questions that you guys have turned in, I'd like to introduce our panel. We'll start on this end. We have Josh Hawley, who joined the School of Law in 2009. Missouri, where he litigated groundbreaking First Amendment cases before the Supreme Court of the United States, and is currently serving as counsel to Hawley. So this is Josh Hawley. That's our first. I'm just going to go in random order because I don't have them in the order that they're sitting at the table. So we also have Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer. He's Congressman from the 3rd Congressional District of Missouri. He is a native of St. Elizabeth, Missouri, and operates a 160-acre farm there. A strong agricultural background, and also has been a small businessman in the banking and insurance business. He served as a bank regulator for the state of Missouri earlier in his career. From 1999 to 2005, he was a Missouri State Representative and served as chairman of the Financial Services Committee. And he was appointed by Governor Matt Blunt to serve as the director of the Missouri Division of Tourism. He serves as vice chairman of the House Small Business Committee, where he is also serves on the House Small Business Subcommittees on Health and Technology and Agriculture, Energy and Trade. And he is a member of the Knights of Columbus National Rifle Association. He is a graduate of Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, where he earned a degree with distinction in political science and a minor in business administration. Congressman Luetkemeyer. We have Senator Ron Richards, who represents the 32nd Senatorial District. He was also served as a state representative for the 129th House District and was Speaker of the House in 2008. In November 2011, he was elected as a state senator and as the first Speaker of the House to be elected to the Missouri Senate in 100 years. He is a partner in the A&R Development and C&R Development Corp. and is a former mayor of Joplin and also served on the Joplin City Council from 1990 to 94. He's a member of the NFIB and has received awards from the St. Louis Business Journal Legislative Award and the Republican National, was a delegate to the Republican National Convention on multiple occasions, and has a Bachelor of Arts from Missouri Southern State University and a Master of Arts from Southwest Missouri State University. Ron Richards. We have Speaker of the House Tim Jones. He is State Representative from 110th District. He is a member of the law firm of Doster LLC. Did I butcher that good? All right. He has argued successfully before various courts of appeal. He began his career as an assistant prosecuting attorney in the state of New York. He has served as Speaker of the House for the remainder of the 96th General Assembly and was also elected by the other state representative to be Speaker of the House in the 97th General Assembly. And let's see here, he's the Individual Service Award recipient and Business Person of the Year Award from Chesterfield Chamber of Commerce. He received his BA with a double major in English and Russian Studies and with honors from Fordham University, and also got his law degree from St. John's University School of Law. Speaker Tim Jones. State Representative Jason Smith, who is also a Republican candidate for Missouri's 8th Congressional District. He is soon to be my congressman. As a legislator, he has taken the fight for our liberties in Jefferson City, where he earned a reputation as a guardian of traditional Missouri values, an advocate for a small, more efficient governor, and a vocal proponent for fiscal conservative and lower tax. Conservatism and lower taxes. He attended law school in Oklahoma before returning home to serve his community. He has a family farm in Dade County and a law practice, and thanks to his efforts, his colleagues selected him to serve in leadership, first as the Majority Whip, more recently as Speaker Pro Tem. State Representative Jason Smith. We also have Representative Rich Stream, who is the chairman of the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives. He has formerly worked as Budget Project Director for the Department of Defense, Army Aviation and Logistics Command, Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder, who has served Missouri for a long time and done so honorably. You all know him. We appreciate your service. Let's give him a round of applause. All right, so we have picked out a few questions from you, the audience, to ask these members of this panel. And when we get through with these, we will see if there are any more as we run out of time. I know the panelists said they want to sit here for at least 3 hours, so we'll try to make it work a while. Let's start with Speaker Tim Jones. Why should we not expand Medicare? Medicaid, sorry.
That could take 3 hours. Jason Smith told me that short and sweet is the way to answer the question, so I will. I'll give the basics on that. So, you know, the Medicaid expansion issue was something that was largely not on our radar screens as a legislature because the governor forgot those 2 words during his first 4 years in office and was incredibly silent on the issue to the point of suggesting in a press conference back in August of 2012, before the election, that he didn't think that Missourians were very much in favor of that individual mandate thing when he was asked by the press. So we all thought that the governor, in addition to taking credit for the balanced budget, the AAA bond rating, and not raising taxes, was also in agreement with us that the President's Unaffordable Health Care Act was equally not good for Missourians. Within 3 short weeks after the election, the governor changed his tune dramatically and unveiled a massive proposal that apparently he threw together in 3 weeks, although I doubt it, I'm sure it was percolating before the election, to decide that the donut hole created by Chief Justice Roberts' opinion of giving the states the option of whether or not to expand Medicaid was an option that Missouri should vigorously pursue. And we should dramatically expand our current Medicaid system and bring in 300,000 to 400,000 able-bodied Missourians onto the Medicaid rolls because that would create jobs. So that's the plan that was unveiled by the governor. Originally, and if you look back at some of the press accounts, his position on this has definitely evolved over the last few months. Initially, it was simply the talking points of we should allow more Missourians to have access to affordable health care. That message was not resonating very well, so they repackaged it into a jobs bill. Our budget chairman will probably also want to weigh in, get into the weeds maybe a little bit more on this, but I will tell you that this is a proposal that has no legs to the stool. And conveniently enough, the free federal money of about $2 billion a year will be brought into Missouri. Remember that 40% of it is borrowed money that the government is printing or borrowing. And the remaining amount is your taxpayer dollars that are simply being recycled and sent back to Missouri. Conveniently, after the 3 years are up and Governor Nixon's no longer in office, suddenly the state now has to figure out how to pay for this to the tune of taxpayer dollars of at least $1 billion a year, if not more. That is a dramatic hit on our budget long term. So I don't believe we should take short-term free stuff when there's no long-term plan to pay for that. The governor has not proposed how to pay for it either. He has continued to stick by his no new taxes pledge. So if we're not going to raise taxes and the economy is not going to suddenly take off like a rocket, which it hasn't, it's been slowly recovering, where does that money come from? Well, it has to come from some other part of the budget. So in a $24 billion budget with $9 million of discretionary revenue, I suppose the governor's in favor of taking that money from our education system or from other social services, or perhaps from our roads and bridges. So it's a bad plan with no long-term solution. Finally, let's talk about the job creation component of that. I completely disagree with the very self-congratulatory study put forth by the Missouri Hospital Association that says this is going to be some giant jobs engine. Let's talk about the jobs that are going to be created. They're going to be bureaucratic, administrative jobs to basically manage and oversee a massive entitlement expansion. Those aren't the kind of jobs that are going to put Missourians back to work and improve and expand our economy. What we need is pro-jobs, pro-growth policies in our state. I'll finish up on this point. We need policies such as have been passed by your Republican legislature over the last 10 years that resulted last year, year to year, while we're in the middle of this recession, our economy improved by about 4%. That was without a single tax increase and without a single enlargement of any entitlements. It's pro-jobs, pro-growth policies that create jobs in our state, not entitlement expansion.
This next question is for Congressman Luetkemeyer. It says, Congressman Steny Hoyer said America doesn't have a spending problem, that we have a paying for problem. Would you explain the difference?
Well, I hate to speak for the minority leader. He needs to be able to defend his own remarks, but at the end of the day, pay for is another word for tax increase. And I think that you all understand that. You understand that the president is in his State Union address is talking about more spending, more tax increases, and this administration has had 4 years, $5 trillion worth of additional debt that we've accumulated, a stimulus package of over $800 billion that's cost us almost $1 trillion now to look at interest on it, and we still got negative growth this last quarter. We have a real unemployment rate over 14%. What they're doing is not working, and again, the Democrats are starting to show colors by what they're saying and what they're doing. And part of it is because we are finally getting them to the point where they have to accept responsibility to put the budget together. They're finally having to take responsibility to show how they want to lead, because they have done nothing over the last 4 years. The president hasn't passed the budget, has even offered, well, he's offered the budget. And it's unique. The Senate hasn't passed anything in 4 years. And yet, in fact, the president sent 2 budgets to the Senate that didn't get a single vote, not even a Democrat vote. And yet, they sit there and harangue us for trying to at least put forward some ideas to try to start the discussion. And this is one of the frustrations that we have, from the standpoint that we really don't have a willing partner to try and drive this train to get our deficits under control. Early this last month, we had our retreat, and we decided that we're going to try and get our budgets in a position where we can try and get the budget to balance within 10 years. That's going to be our goal. And we're going to try and drive this train toward that goal. And getting the Senate and the White House to go along with it is going to be a trick. Because obviously they're still spending the tax and spend money. And it's this mindset that has permeated Washington for years and years and years, and is still there, and they don't get the message from you. They don't get it. There's a huge disconnect. There are those groups in Washington that truly believe you give them enough money, they can spend their way out of this mess. You know, you got Paul Bergman on TV every weekend, who is a Keynesian economist who has no idea how to create wealth, no idea how to balance budgets, no idea how to run an economy, and he is the poster child for their economic plan. That's how disastrous the plan is. And you can see from the effects of what's going on in the last 4 years, these guys are driving us over a cliff intentionally, because they have no idea how to stimulate an economy. Well, I'm
like Texas is in a great position. Florida, Nevada, the state of Washington, I've often thought it's no accident that Bill Gates is having. Wyoming, New Hampshire, Tennessee, interesting. Another state bordering Missouri has no income tax now. When I was growing up, I had cousins in Western Tennessee. We would spend a week there every year in the summer. And I remember as a little kid thinking, wow, Tennessee's really backward. They're not as far ahead as Missouri. That's no longer the case. With right to work and no income tax, Tennessee, compared to us, is booming. They have the auto jobs that used to be right here in St. Louis. They have the auto parts suppliers. So now Kansas is moving in the direction of Tennessee and Texas and Florida to say we're going to have no income tax. We have been fighting a fruitless border war with them with tax incentives, the kind David Stokes was speaking about a few minutes ago. And it's often one step forward and 2 or 3 steps backward. And most of the development, even before this dramatic change that's coming, most of the great development in the Kansas City region has been on the Kansas side of the line, in Johnson County, Kansas. And now in Wyandotte, since the building of the racetrack there 15 years ago. So we face an enormous challenge, and it is not limited to the states of Nebraska and Kansas that I mentioned, because Bobby Jindal, who will speak to us in a few hours, from Louisiana, is also moving toward no income tax. This is going to give us the best experimentation for the whole world to see. Do you want to be like Illinois? No. Do you want to be like California? No. New York State? No. Do you want to be like Austin, Texas? Yes. Florida with no income tax? Yes. You know, I'll bet everyone in this room knows someone of relatively high net worth who until a few years ago was a Missouri resident and today has a tax domiciled residency in Florida. Because of no income tax, we are losing, even before this challenge for Kansas, we're losing our deep-pocketed, entrepreneurial, job-creating investors. Capital goes, some wise man said, capital goes where it is welcomed and treated nicely. And people can vote with their feet. And by the way, if you look at the moving van statistics, they keep these numbers. How many thousands of people every year move out of upstate New York to one of these places where capital and labor is treated better than it is in the Rust Belt states dominated by the left? That's why I'm a long-term optimist. And I'll make you another prediction that goes beyond. You didn't ask about, but it's related to the border war. 6 of the 8 states that touch on Missouri, excepting only Kentucky and Illinois, are right to work. I will make a prediction. Within 5 years, Missouri will be a right to work state, and it could happen in the next year. And it needs to.
Okay, our next question goes to Representative Jason Smith. The Post-Dispatch editorial board took its first swipe at you today by irresponsibly mischaracterizing your statements about forced redistribution of wealth from those who earned it to those who did not. You labeled this activity as un-American. Would you expand on your statement?
It appears to me that our conservative message for rural Missouri is penetrating the St. Louis market. And my statement was last Saturday during the nomination process, and I said that whenever government takes from the rich and gives to the poor, it makes us less American. And I defined statement like that, you have no idea of the people that you're representing. They have no idea of the person who is wanting to represent the good folks in the 8th District. They have no idea of the background of where I came from. I believe that government should not be a handout but a hand up. That's how we need to make it. Government only pushes people down. That's one of the problems with Washington. We need to reform the welfare programs. The way that the structure is at the federal level is that, for example, someone can work at minimum wage for 15 hours and they can qualify for all the welfare benefits, whether it's child care subsidies, the different food stamps, whatever welfare benefits. But if they work 16 hours, they lose them all. The way the federal structure is created, it incentivizes people to be more dependent on the federal government and stay on it, and that's exactly what we have to change. We have to incentivize people to get off the program, and then we're not going to start the program. So I'm glad I'm making the St. Louis Post-Dispatch pay attention to Southeast Missouri.
Senator Richards, in light of the recent disaster in Joplin, do you believe the state has done everything it can to aid in free market recovery in that city?
Well, I guess the state's done what they need to do. Our goal in southwest Missouri, and I suspect any disaster, is to try to help ourselves. Frankly, if it hadn't been for the charitable institution, the churches and volunteers, we wouldn't have had any repair and disaster coming along. I mean,
Budget Chair, Mr. Spring. Currently, community colleges have the highest increase in enrollment in Missouri, but their state funding per student is way behind that of four-year colleges. What can be done in the state budget to rectify this inequity?
That's a good question. As a graduate of both, Fairmont Community College and University of Missouri St. Louis, I think that the education system at the college level, certainly in Missouri, is very good. Certainly at the community college level, it's a bargain for students who are trying to work their way through college, like I was. And it's a quality education at an affordable rate. The loans are available. The A+ program has helped a lot of students in the last few years. It's a state-funded program, of course. But the inequity is certainly a challenge. And I know that the higher education establishment is working on that. I would prefer to let them come up with a formula that would make it more equitable. I can certainly, as a budget chairman, allocate funds here and there and make it equitable myself. But I think
gymnasium from a local church to have a graduation ceremony in. It's a public school district. Their gymnasium was too small to have a graduation ceremony, so they rented the gymnasium for one day from a local church. And they got sued by the ACLU, and the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the ACLU and said, no, local school districts and municipalities, City of St. Louis, City of Columbia, where I live, cannot rent spaces from religious groups where there is any kind of religious material around. Now, I don't know about you. Last November, I went into a church to vote. My local polling place is a church. Well, under this decision, that would be unconstitutional. So we're challenging this in the United States Supreme Court. We have what's called a petition pending there. We're asking the court to hear this case. They'll decide on that in the next month or so. Again, this is another, I think, important front as government expands more and more. It comes into more and more places of our lives. It tries to impose its values on us in more and more ways. And so we're trying to challenge that as well. Last thing, I'm not involved in this case, but it's an interesting one. It's a case about class actions. You might know that Congress some years ago passed a big piece of legislation called the Class Action Fairness Act. The point of it was basically to try to limit the number of these hugely expensive plaintiff-driven class actions that cost us billions of dollars a year in economic growth. Well, unfortunately, the 8th District Court of Appeals, or 8th Circuit, I should say, Court of Appeals, of which Missouri is a part, created a significant loophole in CAFA, in the Class Action Fairness Act, by allowing plaintiffs to say that, well, they were only going to seek they weren't going to seek damages over a certain threshold, and therefore they could avoid having to come into federal court. So the 8th Circuit created this pretty large loophole to CAFA. The Supreme Court is currently going to decide this year whether or not that is valid. But I think that the reason it's interesting is that it points us back to something that happened here in our own state. You might remember earlier this summer, the Missouri Supreme Court decided that the caps on medical malpractice damages had to go and struck them down. And so now we are back to a situation in Missouri where there is lots of leeway for medical malpractice damages. Again, it costs billions of dollars a year that drive medical providers out of the state. This is an area where we need to act. We need to press new limits on medical malpractice damages. We need to consider fundamental medical malpractice reform. If it takes a constitutional amendment to get around our Supreme Court's ruling, then we might have to consider that. But this is a policy area, I think, it's an economic issue where we need to be active in pressing forward.
Governor Kinder, Governor Nixon recently purchased a new airplane. He disguised this purchase as a necessity for the highway patrol. How do you feel about that?
As one who, in 2 terms as lieutenant governor, on the state airplane once, when I was acting governor for a 20-minute hop, Matt Blunt was governor, and the plane was fine, it was safe, it was in every respect in good working order. I don't think we needed a new airplane. By the way, this was not a replacement airplane. This was an addition to the fleet, and I would give it the Palin treatment. I would take the plane and put it on eBay and sell it. Governors should be able to travel the state. They should be able to travel the state efficiently and, when necessary, to travel by air. But as I said, we have a fleet, and if you were going to add to that fleet, the proper thing to do would have been to do it up front and not hide behind the highway patrol. I was at the Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, I believe on Wednesday this week, because I was presenting my own budget, which I've asked the committee to reduce the last 2 years. That is, give me less for the coming fiscal year than I got. And I've returned money unspent out of my office budget each of the 8 years I've been in office. But preceding me was the governor's chief of staff. And I can tell you that his testimony amounted to hiding behind the highway patrol and saying it was the colonel's decision, and essentially putting it on arm's length from the governor. You know, this is the governor who doesn't run the Department of Economic Development. Remember that? On Mamtech, the Mamtech scandal at the Moberly, well, he said, I don't run the Department of Economic Development. airplane purchase? Well, that was the colonel of the highway patrol. I mean, when is this governor going to stand up and accept accountability? He should have said, he should have had the honesty to go before Missourians last fall and say, I favor Medicaid expansion, and let us tee up that issue and let Missourians decide. Instead, we got it, as he said, 3 weeks after the election. And we get the airplane purchase about 10 days after his inauguration in his second term. This is not dealing straight with Missourians. And again, if you were going to add to the fleet, why not go out and get a fine used airplane at 35 or 38 cents on the dollar?
Representative String, do you have something to add?
I do. The Colonel of the Highway Patrol came to my office several weeks ago and explained why they purchased the plane. He led off with a comment about the old plane being too expensive to maintain anymore. And that's the reason he needed to buy a new plane. And most all of us in the legislature at that point didn't even know there'd been a plane purchased. So as he explained in my office why they had to buy a plane, well then I said, well then you're going to sell the old plane, right? Because it's too expensive to maintain now, right? He said, no, we're going to keep it because we need more planes to make all these trips. So that was kind of perplexing. He then came to testify before the House Budget Committee on a supplemental, and he was grilled pretty severely. Unfortunately, the colonel was thrown out there at the twist of the wind by the governor, as Governor Kinner said. Clearly, this man did not make the decision to buy a plane. But in the testimony that he gave, it came out that he had, from RFP going out to bids coming in to the purchase of the plane was 2 weeks' time. Now, I worked for the federal government for 30 years, and I can tell you, you can't move a desk in 2 weeks. So there was no way possible that this happened in 2 weeks, legitimately. The other thing he said that when we questioned him on why they needed a second plane, as apparently it turns out, because there was obviously so many requests to fly the plane, they kept no logs of requests the past few years. So there's no evidence to show that they needed a plane or didn't need a plane. But I think since the plane has been purchased, the old one has flown like 5 hours. So clearly they didn't need the second plane.
Congressman Luetkemeyer, on the new proposal regarding the confiscation of privately owned guns, give us your forecast of what you expect to happen on a federal level.
Nothing. This move by the president and the liberal left is nothing more than the president pandering to the left. Even Senator Feinstein, who has got a bill over the Senate, her own bill, doesn't think she can get it through her own committee. So that should tell you there's nothing going to happen. What's really going on here is the president is trying to appease his liberal left. He knows that he's made the environmentalists mad with some of the things he has not done. They don't think that he's closed down enough coal mines yet. He has not closed down enough coal or electrical generation plants. They don't think he's dammed up enough streams to keep people out of them. I mean, they want us to go back to third world status, and he hasn't done things fast enough for them. So this is a way you can throw him a bone. There's a possibility, although I'm not sure how much, maybe much 50-50, that he actually would approve the Keystone Pipeline now, because we're at the point where the governor of Nebraska has already approved a new route across Nebraska, taking away the environmental concerns. And now it's a matter of, embarrassingly, how am I going to figure out to not approve this because there's no more environmental concerns? And so this is a way that you can throw a bone to those folks. When it comes to the fiscal issues, we're getting close to getting into a corner where he's going to have to come and do some cuts. He's going to have to come, and he knows that this is coming, that he's going to have to come and meet us at some point to try and work through the budget problems that we have. And if he does this, he's again going to alienate his left. And so this is nothing more than an appeasement, pandering to them, throw them a bone, kind of keep them satisfied, stirring up the pot. It's amazing. My office, the phones are lighting up. My email boxes are full. You know, Facebook is going off the wall with all of the concerns that people have, legitimately, because, you know, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And we need to be watchful, as now, not only with the tax issue I talked about a while ago. As long as we have the House, we're not going to raise taxes. As long as we have the House, we're not going to do anything on gun control. But the problem is, this is him pandering to his left. He is on a full frontal attack on us in the House. To not only has he divided the country in his last campaign, he is now trying to divide our own caucus so that we are against each other. And then in doing that, we can't run an effective campaign from our position in the House and lose the House. And he has 2 years of runaway Obama or whatever he wants to do, just like he had the first 2 years of administration. So this is a continuing of his agenda. He's stirring the pot out there, and I think they know in Washington this is a non-starter. This is a loser issue for them. It can't go anywhere. It's like pro-life stuff. They can't pro-choice. There's not pro-life folks in both the House and the Senate side that they can get anything through. But he can do a few things by executive order to kind of stir the pot, to try and nip away a little bit here, a little bit there, some of the stuff that we're doing. But at the end of the day, it's not going to go anywhere. You know, we've just got to hold fast. It's important we hold the House, because if we don't hold the House, this is a runaway train that's going to take us over a cliff without a parachute. So we're very satisfied. It's not going to go anywhere. But again, we've got to work hard to make sure we stop this coming out there.
Senator Richards, can you tell us if there will be any changes made to prevailing wage in the state of Missouri in this session?
Prevailing wage, I bring Dan Brown, Senator Dan Brown, I got it out of the committee last week. And next week we're going to take paycheck protection off starting Tuesday. We're going to run until we finish it, just like we worked out. And prevailing wage, once we get something on the calendar, we'll be running that until we get it finished. The Senate has been more active in this year, the last several weeks, than it's been some years. We've worked evenings, and we're trying to get some things to help Speaker Jones. I think you're going to see us even more active. Let me say that Josh, on his comments about mid-mount, we have some issues with that. We got to get fixed. But this Kansas thing, a lot of it too has to do with education reform, not necessarily about taxation. We're going to take an aggressive stance on lowering income tax and corporate tax. We started, we're doing it each and all the time in order to get the votes. If there isn't enough votes, we just have to wipe it out. We just have to go like the application. We do that each year. But I think the Senate and the House are going to look at education reform, particularly in Kansas City. Because the Kansas City side has a better quality school this year because people are moving to Kansas. So yeah, tax rate is right, but also the quality of the schools, quality of education.
Thank you, Senator. Next question goes to Jason Smith. The National Park Service is attempting to limit access to, if not restrict access completely from many of our state's rivers. Limiting this access would destroy the economies of multiple Missouri counties. What would you do to make sure that this doesn't happen?
A big concern in actually south central Missouri, right in the heart of the 8th Congressional District, is the National Park Service along the Kern River and the Jabs Fork in that area. The federal government right now is going through a process of a general management plan. And if they recommend in the general management plan to close access points along the river, closing horse trails, creating a wilderness area, those types of things much authority to state agencies and federal agencies to promulgate rules and to over-regulate all of our businesses and destroy our economy. And that's what we need to do. We need to start eliminating regulations. There's over 170,000 pages of regulations on the books. 170,000 pages. There's over 2 million federal employees that their sole purpose is to be overzealous regulators. I mean, these are things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to limit the size of government and pull back the regulations and allow small businesses and family farms to actually be able to live without
Oh, wait, no, just a second. The representative sometimes is too modest to talk about his own legislation, and I'll just bring up a very important bill that we'll be hitting the House for within a couple weeks, and it's a good bill. I thought so. I have a good memory. Representative Smith, and I believe there's a companion bill in the Senate. Senator Richard may want to remind me who's carrying it over there. We are going to ensure that Missourians have the constitutional right to hunt, farm, and fish as they know best. Some may say, well, that sounds like puppy dogs and ice cream, and why wouldn't we? But folks, there is a dangerous reality out there. There are out-of-state national organizations that even transcend our national borders, big money interests on the far left who want to take away the ability of states to govern themselves under each one of those categories I just mentioned. And, you know, Missouri's largest industry still remains agribusiness. And if we don't maintain those great industries in our country nationwide, then it's not going to be so easy to feed and clothe the masses if other people are telling us how to work and operate those arenas. So that is something that is going to be a priority of the House this year, and as well as I'll echo Senator Richards' efforts that we also would work on. It's time to start really addressing worker freedom in this state as well.
Build on the speaker's comments to say, I'm sure you've heard of this thing called the Clean Water Act, especially if you own a farm, if you farm, and you've heard of the Clean Water Act. Well, what you might not know is that the Clean Water Act's huge federal statute actually permits states to do the enforcement of many of the regulations that the Clean Water Act requires. But the state of Missouri does not do that. The state of Missouri has opted not to be the enforcer of the Clean Water Act. So the EPA actually enforces the Clean Water Act in this state. That's got to stop. The state of Missouri needs to be the one that's actually enforcing. You can give a lot more consideration to the needs of Missouri farmers and to the needs of Missouri producers. It baffles me that we don't do that the state of Missouri does not actually take the liberties afforded it under the Clean Water Act and enforce it in such a way that looks out for Missouri farmers and Missouri producers, and that's something that needs to change.
All right, we're not going to go too much longer because several of these can't, elected officials have other places they need to be. But I'm going to ask, this is a recurring theme through a lot of these, and I'm going to let the speaker deal with this, not with the easy stuff. But what is the current status of right to work in Missouri, and what action are you taking to level the playing field with our neighboring states?
Well, as I finished up on the last item, and we've decided to call this what it truly is, because taglines tend to sometimes take on negative connotations, and the left and big organized labor has decided to cloak right to work in all kinds of scary nomenclature. So it really is about worker freedom. This issue has nothing much to do with the relationship between an employer and employee. It has everything to do with whether the simple question is, should an employee be forced to join an organization against his or her will or not? I believe they should not. And I very much believe in worker freedom, right to work, and always have, and I've never run away from the issue. I have to operate political reality, though, with a governor whose massive, $15 million treasure chest, half of it came from big labor. We have someone someone waiting in the ranks in the Attorney General's office who is seeking that step up, and I think he needs to start to being asked, where is he on worker freedom issues immediately? Because Governor Nixon's turned out, and there's going to be an election for governor in a few short years, and I think all the candidates for that need to finally decide, are we going to continue to be at a competitive disadvantage? I always say our 8 neighboring states, but really only 7 of them are competitive. You know, our neighbor to the east doesn't do a whole lot as far as competition. They're helping drive jobs our way. But the other 7 bordering neighboring states, with the exception of Kentucky, who is, you know, close to a right to work state, but you know, they are right to work states, and they're competing against us to the point where we're becoming at a severe competitive disadvantage. And the folks who are in the business world, and you know, I know facts are inconvenient things to liberals, but the folks who are the decision makers of where jobs and business will go tell you it is a short initial checklist when they're looking to go to relocate to a state or expand a business there. It is your tax climate and policies, it's your regulatory and labor climate and policies, and it's your litigation climate and labor and litigation policies. And it doesn't have to be much more complicated or nuanced than that. And if you are not a state that has true freedom for your workers, if you're not a right, if you're a, let's remember what the opposite of right to work is. It's closed shop. If you're a closed shop state that doesn't allow your workers to have that freedom, you're pretty quickly crossed off the list. And we need to, it has a lot to do with tax. We've heard a lot about the fair tax, which I also support, tax policy. But the second part of that book is your labor policies. Folks, we have to get a governor who supports that policy. But that's what we do. In the meantime, though, Senator Richard and I fully intend to be teeing up this issue and prepping for that day. And I believe within the next few years, you are going to see a vote, and a successful vote in the chambers on worker freedom.
The Senate has a motion to pass right to work. Tim's right. We got to make sure the state of Missouri has a number of things ready to go before we get to that vote. The reality of it is we'll be locked down in the Senate for some period of time. I'm going to bring that up for a vote. But when we do, and we will, we have a motion to pass. I don't know if we have a vote to override. I traveled with a number of governors in economic development. I traveled with Governor Hawley, and I carried his jobs now, and we went to a meeting with the Japanese when we were trying to get expansion or looking at Toyota when we went to San Antonio on the truck plant, because there was a competition with Ford F-150 in Kansas City. And I was with the gentleman with Toyota, and we asked him for his top 3 priorities, why Missouri couldn't get a Toyota plant in Missouri, and right to work was the very top of it. And I thought Governor Holmes was a joke. A friend of mine is Majority Leader of Tennessee. He told me over time, he said, I hope you guys don't get right to work, because that's going to put you at a competition with them. You know, not recently, several years ago, they got that big diesel plant over there. I mean, the South is where the action is. If you look at all the states, South Carolina just happened to acquire the Boeing plant, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Texas. There's a reason. It's not just because the sun shines there, it's warm, it's because they have a little better climate on labor. But I will tell you, when Tim and I are talking, we have to talk this weekend about taking up that issue. We're going to get, we've got a number of issues. If you're really watching on what the legislature's doing, I mean, we're really, really doing well. When you do unemployment reform, we copied Florida's plan for the state of Florida, over $1 billion. I think that's going to be bigger workers' comp reform what we did. And we caught the Democrats flat-footed because we teed it up right after workers' comp, and we wore them out one day in line of workers' comp. And that wasn't by accident. and send it to basketball.